Alright, how's it going, guys? Today we're going to tie a slider, and we're going to start off with a number 1 34007 hook. And we're also going to use Kevlar thread. And the reason we're going to use Kevlar thread is because we're going to be pulling down deer hair and spinning deer hair, so I need something real tough. So start off by tying it on right where the point of the hook ends, and cut it off. Make sure you have a good base wrapped down, nice and tight. And this is the orientation that the hook is going to swim in the water, with the hook point up. So we're basically going to be tying the fly upside down. And we're going to start off with some black barred rabbit strip or zonker. I like to use zonker that's got the barred effect on it. It looks a little bit better in the water. So start off by cutting yourself a little piece about an inch long. And you're going to tie it facing up with the hook facing down. So that when you spin this around, it'll be in the proper orientation. So you actually want the skin of the rabbit facing up. Just go ahead and lay it on there to get a nice start, and you want it to be about the same length of the hook hanging off the back side of it. And whenever you're wrapping on, make sure to go ahead and wrap it to go around the curve of the hook so that it kind of rides up just a touch. You can see here where I'm starting to go around and follow the curve of the hook. Make sure it's on nice and straight before you pull it down tight. Once you get it on nice and straight, go ahead and start wrapping back forward, and then go ahead and trim off your little bit of excess. And I like to make sure that it's nice and trimmed so that I can get a nice smooth transition into the next material. Go ahead and clean that up. Now you can see what orientation will look like, and you can see how it follows the curve of that hook going up. Alright, now the next material that we're going to tie on is a little bit of strung marabou. I like a ginger color. I like to kind of set off the colors a little bit to kind of get that transition. And I'm going to attach 2 small pieces of feather on each side of the hook. Between the zonker and the marabou, this fly is going to have a lot of movement in the water whenever I'm not doing anything. When I'm letting it fall, it's going to have a lot of movement. Go ahead and trim and make sure to get the excess material off of there. So I just need a little pinch on each side. I'm going to go ahead and lay that down. And I just want to basically secure it into place with a couple of wraps so that I can make sure it's lined up where I want it. Make sure that the zonker is still sticking out the back side, and just kind of adjust it as needed. Once I get the first side set, I'm going to go ahead and get 2 more little pieces, and I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side of the hook shank. Make sure that they're both set the equal distance. You can make any tiny little adjustments you need to make sure that there's enough zonker sticking out the back side. Alright, once that's done, go ahead and trim these off as tight as possible. And once you get them trimmed, go ahead and clean up with a couple wraps and make sure to secure it down nice and tight. One of the tricks I like to do is I actually like to wet the marabou sometimes, and that'll get it to lay back out of the way whenever I'm working. Alright, next material we're going to put is a little bit of crystal flash. This is kind of a copper color or coffee color, and I don't need very much. I just need a couple strands just to give it a little bit of flash coming off the tail. And I bring it up underneath the hook shank. I pinch it so it's nice and even, and then I slowly wrap it down onto the hook shank, spreading to both sides so that I get it nice and parallel. Kind of mimic a little lateral line, if you will. Once I get those wrapped up, I want to make sure they're nice and secured, nice and straight coming off the back, and it's even as well. Whenever you use this Kevlar thread, it does have a tendency to build up a little bit faster, but it is strong material. And then of course I like to add a little bit of Zap-A-Gap as I go along to make a pretty bulletproof fly. I don't want this thing falling apart after 3 or 4 fish. I want to be able to fish it for the entire day. Alright, so now that we've got our Marabou, we've got our zonker, and a little bit of flash on there, the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start by putting on some eyes. So I'm going to wrap almost all the way to the front. I'm going to leave about 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to build up a tiny little ball right there. And the point of that ball is to kind of secure my eyes, give it something to sit against. So you can see right here where I've started that little section. And I like to use the pseudo eyes. They're painted really nicely, they give it a nice finish, and of course I'm going to attach these to the top of the hook, and that's going to cause that hook to flip over, that fly to flip over and ride point side up. And that really helps to keep it weedless, keep it out of the grass, and basically allow me to slide it along the bottom, if you will. So I'm going to go ahead and start off with my helicopter wraps. Once I get those on, then I'm going to wrap underneath the eyes. And what that does is those pinches, those helicopter wraps, make sure that they stay in place really well and keeps them from sliding or spinning around the fly. You can always add a little bit of Zap-A-Gap right here on top of that to make sure they're secure. I do it at the very end once I've got a nice solid base wrap. So you can see where the eyes are going to sit up underneath. Alright, so here's where we're going to get our deer body hair. I like to use a golden brown because there's a little bit of transition in the color. It matches up to the zonker that I've already used and gives it a nice color. As you can see, I cut from the bottom, working toward the back, and that way I can get nice, even clumps and attach it to the fly very well. I also save more material this way versus cutting from the other direction. I want to start off with a pretty large clump for the first one, pull out any underfur that might be there, hold on to it really tight and pinch it down, and I'm going to line this up right with the point of the hook shank, right where I first attached the thread. I'm going to pull myself a little bit of slack, and I'm going to make 3 wraps all the way around the deer hair before I pull tight. Once I get those 3 wraps, I'm going to pull it really tight, and you can see how the deer hair flares all the way around. Once I get that little bit of a flare going around the hook, that's where I'm going to reach forward, grab all of the hair material, and make a couple wraps up underneath it. And you can see that starts to pull that hair back for me. And I'm going to repeat this same exact process one more time with about the same amount of material. I've heard people say it's about the thickness of a pencil or a thickness of a golf tee. I just kind of feel it out, and you'll kind of figure out what works best for you. So I'm going to pull all the hair back, get it out of the way, and then when I do that, I'm going to pinch that material down and repeat the exact same process. I'm going to make my 3 wraps loosely around it, and I want this to come behind the eyes. That's pretty important. Once I do that, then I can let go of it, and you can see that the hair does not spin. It stays in place, and that's important to kind of building up that body at the very end. Go ahead and make my wraps underneath to kind of hold some of that hair back. And again, I'm still wrapping behind the eyes. Alright, once I get that set up, I'm going to move the thread to the front of the eyes. Make sure I have a nice clean hook shank. I don't want a lot of wraps on the hook yet because I do want the hair to spin all the way around the hook. If you have a lot of thread down, that'll sometimes impede the hair from spinning all the way around the hook. I am going to go with a little bit larger clump because I am going to be drawing this all the way around the hook shank. Alright, so once I've pulled all the underhair out, I'm going to go ahead and line it up like I have before, pull some slack, make 3 full wraps, making sure the thread stays in front of the hook eyes. And I'm just loosely wrapping it on there. Once I get it to where I want, I'm going to start to pull tight, let go of the hair, and start to spin it all the way around. I keep pulling until it's got a nice, even hair flying all the way around the hook shank. Once I get that, push it back a little bit with my fingers. There is a very nice tool that you can use for packing hair. This is one version of it. It's a little piece of plastic with 4 different size holes. You just find whichever hole fits over the eye of the hook, push back, and you can see where I brace on the back of the hook so that I can really pack that hair in tight. Once I do that, I'll leave it in place, make a couple wraps with the thread, and you can see that it starts to hold it in place. Once I've done that, it'll be time to tie off the hook. Make sure you're getting all the hair back and you're getting it all the way around the eye of the hook. So the last thing to do is to go ahead and tie a knot to finish this off. You can do it 2 different ways. You can wrap the thread around your finger and tighten a knot. Because I cannot find my whip finish tool. Or you can use a whip finish tool, which makes it a lot easier. It lets you be a little bit more precise in making sure you're getting that thread locked in there. Whenever I'm spinning deer hair, I want to make sure I get this tied off really tight. I want to make sure it's placed in there well. You don't want it coming apart on you whenever you do start to trim. So I only start off with 2 because I do finish it off with a little bit of zap-a-gap on that knot. Once I get it trimmed off, pull tight and cut off the Kevlar. I will tell you that a good pair of scissors is very important when you're doing this. You want to make sure to get nice clean cuts, and Kevlar thread does dull scissors, so make sure you have a good pair of scissors. So I turn the fly upside down, which would be the side that faces the bottom of the, and start by trimming that off all nice and even. Then I'll spin the hook around where it'll be riding right side up, and I go in there and I just make my rough cut the first time around. I just want to get a shape formed first before I start trimming everything. And just slowly start spinning that hook, taking a little bit of material. You can always go back and cut more, but you can never go back and add once you've done this. And as you can start to see that cone shape starting to take place. Of course, you want to make sure you're trimmed down enough that the eyes become exposed. But I do want to make sure that I leave a little bit of collar, which helps to hide the hook, make it a little bit more weedless, and push more water as well. And take your time when you're trimming. You know you've already invested a little bit of material in this fly and a little bit of time, so you want to make sure you take your time and trim it really, really well. The nice thing about this fly is that it falls real slow in the water column because of all the spun deer hair. It has just enough weight with the eyes to get it to the bottom where you can slide it along the bottom or atop the grass. But I like something that kind of suspends in that water column for a little bit of time, making it easier for that fish to kind of see it and hone in on it. Go ahead and knock off all the excess hair that's kind of in the way. I like to trim up around the hook, or the eye of the hook, make sure I can tie on my leader really, really well. You can see how I've got my collar going, kind of hiding that hook in there, and make sure you got a nice even trim along the bottom. So that's basically it, guys. It's pretty straightforward and simple. At this point, I'll go ahead and add that zap-a-gap like we mentioned before, right on the dumbbell eyes. I'll go ahead and add a little bit behind it on the base thread, and then of course right at the very front of the hook. Once you let it dry, go ahead and poke the eye of the hook out to make sure that you don't have anything slowing down tying on a leader and impeding tying on a leader. But that's basically it, guys. It's a little slider. I like this color a lot. I like to use natural colors like your browns and greens. It works very well for redfish. Even your trout will come in and hit something like this. But the fact that it falls real slow in the water column is something I like. Very buggy and has a lot of action to it and pushes a good amount of water for a very small fly. You can tie it on the next size down on a 6, an 8, even a 4 if you were trying to downsize on a 6 weight maybe, or a 7 weight. This is set up ideal for an 8 weight fly rod with the weight of the hook and the size of the hook. But it's a great little fly right there. I love tying these. They make up a large amount of my fly box. I really appreciate it. Join me again next time. We'll get a couple more flies out there on the channel, and we'll see you next time.